Upside. I am Brewery Mark. Danger is out tonight. Joining me is Chris Emmerich. How's it going, sir?
Doing good, doing good. I know that Adam should be joining us shortly as well, but I'm ready to go. We've got a lot to talk about today.
All right. Well, since it's 7 o'clock, why don't we start with some hockey? Because I think that all tips off at 7:30. So we have a half hour. And if anybody, for everybody out there listening live, at 11:30 this morning, we went in depth into all these lineups and your best DFS plays, but we kind of wanted to do a little review and see what we landed on. So, how's your lineups looking for tonight?
All right, so so what I ended up with on my GPP lineup is, the Rasmus Anderson play. I really like him. I was watching Joe Hoka's Twitch stream earlier today. I threw that name out there because he was commenting that there wasn't a lot of value in the consensus in the chat and, amongst him, and everybody was that Rasmus Anderson was a really good play. He has some different insight and he looks at some things a little bit differently than we do. So it was kind of interesting to watch his process. And the thing that I would say about it was a lot of the things that we were saying were the same things that he was saying, but he was finding different statistics that back that up. So it's always nice to kind of have your process kind of validated by somebody that, does this professionally and is pretty successful at it. I did go with Halak on my GPP lineup here. I've got a double stack of the Blackhawks. I went with Taves and Kane, but I also went with Brinkett and Strome. Got a little Thomas Vanek, a little bit of Josh Bailey, and then some Philippe Hunrich as well to kind of round it out. So really, really hoping that Chicago piles it on and Detroit, scores 7 goals all from Thomas Vanek unassisted.
Yeah, I didn't quite go with the Chicago second line completely, but I did do a Chicago power play stack, which gave me access to shit. I'm drawing a blank right now.
DeBrincat?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to get some exposure to him. I didn't put him in my main lineup, in my cash lineup. I felt like the correlation with Taves and Kane, and yeah, I couldn't pull the trigger on putting another guy in there. I had some other guys that I liked as well that, I felt stronger about. So I wanted to get him in my GPP lineup. That's kind of what I, do. I make as many lineups to make sure that I get exposure to the guys that I like. Luckily, I didn't need to make a lot of lineups tonight because there really weren't a lot of guys that I liked.
Yeah.
And that's just what it came down to. I thought Taves and Kane are your top 2 plays, and then you kind of just build it out from there.
Yeah, I was looking at ownership earlier, and it looked like Detroit's top line was going to be heavily owned. So I went ahead and did a GPP with Chicago's top line with Detroit's second line. So Rasmussen, Nielsen, Nyquist, and put them with Taves and Kane. My thought process, being a Red Wings fan, is Chicago's second line is less defensively sound, and Taves and Kane are Detroit killers. So combine those two, maybe I'll get lucky and have a high-scoring game.
Yeah, hey, I mean, I really liked Josh Bailey. I didn't like him enough to put him in cash, but it's a position that Calgary struggles with. I thought Bailey was playing well. I thought about stacking that line, but decided against it, especially with that goalie switch. So, that's where it's at. We'll kind of maybe check back in here in 20, 30 minutes and kind of see how it kind of plays out and kind of take it from there. But I think Adam's on the call now. Adam, are you there?
What's going on, fellas?
How's it going?
A whole lot. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm actually digging the hockey talk here.
Why, thank you.
Yeah, we haven't had much else. So we've been going in. I'm kind of afraid for tomorrow because we have 30 minutes. And we've been taking that entire 30 minutes in the morning and breaking down the NHL. So we're going to have to they'll somehow work some NBA in there and make it all work.
Yeah, it's going to have to be more highlights going forward, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's
Well,
been
hey,
fun.
what are you guys drinking? I mean, we just got right into the hockey talk. I was supposed to have to wake up tomorrow at 7 in the morning, which is way earlier than I normally wake up. So I was going to hold off on the drinking, but I got a call today around 3:30 when I was taking a nap. Because that's what I do in the middle of the day because my dog wants to take a nap and she likes it when we go into the bed and she's like, she's kind of finicky like that. So, hey, I was told that I don't have to do that tomorrow. So what did I do? I threw on some clothes. I headed out to the brew hub and I picked up myself some beer. Right now I'm drinking a Imperial Irish Red that was barrel aged in Woodford bourbon barrels. And I have a Florida Dippa as well.
Ooh,
Double fist in it?
No, but I am going to drink all 64 ounces, 32 of each. I went and got some, I got crawlers. They're easy. Yeah, easy to get.
What do you got in front of you, Adam?
I've got a little Elysian Space Dust, actually.
That's pretty yummy.
Yeah, I'm an IPA guy. I tend to like West Coast IPAs quite a bit. And this one's pretty solid. I've got a couple, can't remember the name of it, Shorts and Lagunitas kind of did a little collaboration on this one. I've got a couple of those waiting for me at home. I'm still at work right now. Yes, I do keep beer at work because I'm smart.
Is it a collaboration when you own the company?
No, that'd be nice.
Lagunitas is like 49% ownership, aren't they?
Well, they advertise it as a collaboration between Shorts and Lagunitas. I know those two are together now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a Spanish company that owns both of them.
Do you feel like any of the Shorts? I don't know if you're a hoppy beer guy at all, Mark, but do you feel like any of the Shorts product has suffered at all because of the ownership of Lagunitas now?
I don't think so. What little I've had, I personally have never been a huge Shorts fan. I always thought they put out a lot of weird, crazy stuff that just didn't work. My favorite thing now they make the best brown in the state, which is Bel Air Brown.
Oh, Bel Air. Bel Air Brown's phenomenal.
It's just it's phenomenal. It's top of my list for browns.
Yep, right with you.
So I kind of tend towards their darker beers, but what I've had, I haven't noticed any difference in the brewing process or anything. They were already pretty huge. I mean, their buyout was more about working capital than anything.
Okay. Hey, I will tell you though, I had, speaking of the other beer in that question that you're having, I had Space Dust pre-acquisition, and I've had Space Dust post-acquisition.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it is night and day. It's not even close. I mean, again, and we've talked about this time and time again, when you expand and create that type of ability to distribute nationwide, it's going to take a hit. There's just no way to avoid it.
Same thing with CBS from Founders. Absolutely.
Yeah,
sure,
so
or
disappointing.
Anything Founders does really is not what it was. Same thing with like Cigar City or some of these breweries. I mean, Founders is probably the easiest one for you guys to relate to because it's there. Cigar City for me because it's here. But I've been in craft beer long enough to remember, Founders when it was rare down here, and some of those offerings were very, very good when you got them. I mean, even Backwoods Bastard, now that's year long, it's still delicious, but it's not what it was in 2012, 13, and 14.
Now, there's something to be said about small batch stuff. It's like the CBS is a great example. It used to be every 2 to 4 years they would release that. Now it's every year, and it's big batches, and it's just not the same. You don't get the same maple kick out of it. I mean, it just, to me, like this year's batch just tasted like a sweet CBS or a KBS.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed in it, to be honest. It was like you said, Chris. It's still good, but it just doesn't give you that wow factor that they normally do in the smaller batches.
No, I mean it sits on the shelf here in Florida. A lot of the Michigan beers that even sometimes they still sell out up there sit on the shelves here. And I mean the original CBS at one point, in the height of beer raffles and razzles and or whatever you want to call them. I mean, it was going for several $100s per bottle. Like I said, you could probably go find the second release of CBS down here still on a shelf somewhere. So, but I mean, look, the same thing can be said about Cigar City. The same thing can be said about um, Funky Buddha down here. I was able to get all of those Funky Buddha beers yesterday, and all of their barrel aged products are pretty easy, the ones that get distributed. But I remember back in 2014 waiting 3 or 4 hours in a line for a one per person barrel aged Last Snow, which is called Last Buffalo, which is fantastic beer. And it immediately was selling after people bought it in line to other people in line that didn't want to wait any longer for $125. And I think it capped out around 250, 300. But now I can go get that same beer for $30. It's not as good, but it's on the shelf. So, I mean, there's a give and take, I suppose.
Yep, no doubt.
Yeah, so we're having another snowy, icy, gross day up here in northern Michigan. So I decided I'm going to open Omegang's King of the North, which is a 11% Russian Imperial Stout. And
Is it the barrel aged offering? Because I know they have a barrel aged one that they just came out with.
no, this is just the regular one. I haven't seen the barrel aged one. Oh wait, no, this is the barrel aged one.
Nice, nice. I thought
Read,
about picking one up.
yeah, reading the label, it's an imperial stout aged for 6 months in bourbon barrels.
Mm, sounds
So
tasty.
yeah, it looks good, and I haven't been a huge fan of the Game of Thrones series, but this one is the one I'm looking the most forward to. So that is
Hey,
what I will be opening.
I'm in the same boat. I'm really envious of you right now. I'm over here drinking an Imperial Irish Red because that's the only thing that they had barrel aged. There was a strong ale that was made, is called the Dude that I saw online, and it was part of the reason I went there. And it was supposed to have like vanilla and kind of mimic a White Russian. But when I got there, they said there was no growler fills. It was on nitro, and I was like, I don't care. Put it in a growler. Let's go. Uh, Fine in 2 hours, but alas, they wouldn't do it, so I was stuck with this.
Yeah, nitro beers are a little hard to fill to go.
It would have been okay. But hey, you know what? Speaking of buyouts, let's break into some AAF news. So the big news, I think it was yesterday or the day before, was that the AAF had to secure a majority owner because they were having financial problems. Now, it looked like some of the reporting was a little bit early on that, and I found it hard to believe that Ebersol and Polian would start this league and not have any type of funding that would go beyond week one. And so while that payroll hiccup seemed kind of like an unplausible scenario and just very coincidental, it's just hard for me to believe that they set all this up and they weren't going to have the funding capital that was going to run them through week one or week two of the season. But I just saw an article that came out in the Orlando Sentinel. I guess Spurrier kind of spilled the beans on his radio show and hinted at the initial investor backed out and put the league's working capital in jeopardy. Basically, what happened is he led them to believe that he had the money or he could get the money to get them through the first year, and then he just sort of bailed out. So that's when they went ahead and got to Dungeon, and now they have 250 million. So what does it matter? I mean, they've got more than enough money at this point. What do you guys think?
That sounds like a very plausible explanation. I mean, I've been through it where I've had investors pull out the last minute and you're scrambling. I'm happy to see a hockey guy come into it. I'll tell you that.
Well, sure, and I don't think you put $250 million into a venture that you don't believe in. I mean, I'm sure he has a lot of money and more than he knows what to do with. But when you have that type of money invested in something, it seems like you have it set up for the long haul. And I certainly think that this league has the potential. There's certainly issues that they've had, not just with the product on the field, but a couple other things that I think. But I think they can work through that, and I think that it's going to fill a very good void. And certainly, it's something that I've been excited to watch most of the time.
Yeah, and I think it should do good. I mean, the ratings were higher than expected, which means next year they're going to be able to up their TV contracts, and they have a few things to fix, like the app is terrible, the website's terrible, um, some of the camera work. Get some new announcers. Geez, they're horrible, and I don't know. And the reffing's been terrible in it, but hey, it's a new league. But they just have a few things that you just have to tweak a little bit, if that makes sense. And I think it'll be a super successful league. Especially, I love the 10-week format. Just quick and dirty and get it done.
Well, sure. And we've got some less than appealing games this week, though. I will tell you, looking at the slate of games that we have in front of us, it's going to be a little bit tougher to get behind some of these. We're going to lead it off. Let's just get right into it. We've got the Arizona Hotshots at the Salt Lake Stallions. Josh Woodrum should be making his return for the Salt Lake Stallions, and this is a rematch of Week 1. If you remember, this was the one game that went into the over, which is listed at 45.5 in Week 1. Woodrum hurt his hamstring in the last series before the half, and we've had the Stallions kind of scrambling with Scott Linehan's son, this guy Austin Allen last week, and the offense just hasn't looked very good. Where on the other side of things, Arizona Hotshots out 6 out of the 8 quarters that they've played, that offense has looked really, really good. Started slow last week, but this is a situation where they're going up against the Salt Lake Stallions team that they decimated in the first week. And so the Hotshots opened as 3-point favorites. They've got them as 4-point favorites right now. I feel pretty confident that the Hotshots should be able to cover that, although I think we're going to see a little bit of a better game than we did in the second half of the last one. Did you have a chance to catch either of these teams yet, Mark or Adam?
No, I've only seen a little bit of Orlando. I've had a really hard time being able to match my TV viewing with the AAF broadcasts.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm right with you. I've watched very little of the AAF so far. It happened to be on. I know Orlando was playing, and their quarterback was just lighting the world on fire in their first game, but I've caught very little of it so far. I've been kind of followed along with some of your write-ups, Chris, but overall, as far as my viewing, I haven't seen much of it.
Well, I'll help you guys out with that too. We'll talk after, and we'll kind of figure out what kind of the process that I've been using. I've been able to watch all the games via my PlayStation and my phone and a couple other things. So we can talk offline about how to get that done, because it's certainly going to depend on what kind of TV you have and the capability. But let's talk about Fanball. So Fanball has created a $1,000 to first place tournament for this week. It just keeps growing, so it's pretty exciting. It's a $10 entry, so 500 and I think 88 people or something along those lines. So a pretty good tournament. Now, in this game specifically, we do have Josh Woodrum, who I think is a viable quarterback, but with a hamstring injury 2 weeks out, probably going to avoid him. On the other side of it, John Wolford is the QB2 of the league, and I think he's one of the two guys that's viable for the week. The other one being Orlando's quarterback, of course. So there's no reason to try and get fancy. There's no reason to be contrarian in the QB slot. These are the two guys that have the capability of putting over 20 points, and I think everybody else in the QB position has had a trouble at least even scoring 10 points. So given that, there's no leverage to be had. Pick one of these two guys, kind of roll with it. The big thing to watch in this game is the backfield for the Hotshots. So Larry Rose was cut by the Hotshots, leaving them with 3 running backs. You have Presley. Presley was the lead back and a bell cow back in Week 1, but we had Cook activated last week, and he took a good amount of the carries away, and Stockton had a big run as well. That being said, Presley was still on the field more. He was targeted more, ran more routes, and ran the ball more. I think it was just a situational lead that he wasn't as successful in the first half. They got down, and some other guys kind of just plugged in. So I don't have a problem going back to Presley, thinking of him as a bell cow back, and I have him as rated as my number 2 back of the week. There's a clear number 1 that we'll get to in a little bit, but I think he's going to have a depressed ownership because of his performance last week, but it doesn't take away from his quickness, his explosiveness, his ability to break the big play, which he did. I'm pretty excited about him, and I'm going to certainly play him a significant amount. On the other side of things, in the Salt Lake backfield, Brandon Oliver is listed over Joel Bawano as the starting running back. They both got some touches last week. Bawano did score, but Oliver had the bulk of it. So I think they're both. It ends up being that they're both viable. What you're going to see in this league is running backs checking out more frequently because they're not in as good shape as they would be if they were in the NFL, and then the other guy getting a little bit more run. I mean, when you think about, let's say, like Ezekiel Elliott, for example, he might check out for a play, and then he comes back in the next play. You don't really see that. If somebody checks out, they're probably going to be out for 2 to 4 plays. So if they have a big run or they were part of the drive to get it into the red zone, unfortunately, the majority of these guys are not getting the extra touches that gets them the score. They get the yards, but they don't get the score, and that can be really frustrating for fantasy. Mark, you did really well last week in Fanball, right?
I did.
Okay.
It doesn't look like that $10,000 contest is gone already.
No, it's $1,000 to first, not 10,000.
Oh, I thought it was a 10,000 prize pool. So it's the 5,000 prize pool, $1,000 top prize.
Yeah, that's the one that I'm talking about.
Yeah. I just reserved my entry.
Nice. So when we go into wide receivers, I think this game specifically has a couple. It has one of the best wide receiver options in Rashard Ross. 23 fantasy points per game. He's getting the targets. It seems like he's the favorite target for Walford. I think Huff got involved a little bit more last week. I don't have all the target numbers in front of me, but he seemed to have some trouble holding on the ball. There's some justification that maybe he's a little bit hurt. So Ross is kind of a primary guy, and I think that he's going to be one of the top wide receivers, and certainly should be. I don't think anybody else in this game outside of Ross or Huff from the wide receiver position really justifies any type of ownership. I have no interest in Pearson L or Leslie, but with Woodrum coming back, I am pretty interested in the tight ends for Salt Lake, who got a lot of run in that first half. Specifically, where is Seattle? I have it in the wide receiver. I want to say Anthony Denham. First week, he got quite a few targets in that first half from Woodrum. 5 receptions, 7 targets, 59 yards. So he's a guy that I'm interested in, maybe in a flex spot at 4,500. If you want to kind of jam some studs in there with Rashard Ross, Presley, and some other guys that we're going to talk about, he might be your salary saver. So that's going to be the first game. That's going to be on at 3 o'clock on Saturday. Moving forward beyond that, we do have the Memphis Express with Christian Hackenberg at the Orlando Apollo. So,
oh my God, I did watch Memphis last week, and the whole game he's just like, you got to run the other way. You're running the wrong route. That's why I can't pass it to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's not that much different than what you see maybe even with Tom Brady on the sideline, right? Like, he gets fiery, he gets angry when people aren't in the right position. But here's the difference. Tom Brady's executing on his side of the deal. When it comes to Christian Hackenberg, I texted you guys, he fumbled the first 2 plays last week. One wasn't his fault, so we're going to take that kind of out of the equation. But he did fumble the first play. He was able to recover it, and that's okay. But he has been completely ineffective. The word is that Singletary is saying he's going to be on a shorter leash this week. So I expect to see a change in quarterback probably within the first or second quarter. But with that all said, I have no interest from anybody on Memphis. You can make a case that Zach Stacy is a viable running back. Here's the problem. They are not going to have the game flow. It was a problem. I was afraid from it last week that they were going to get behind, and as a result, he wasn't going to get a heck of a lot of run, and they got ahead, and so he did get a lot of run. I don't see that happening against the Apollos. The real big difference that you're seeing with the Steve Spurrier Sun and Gun offense is that it's 3rd and 16. Other teams are running draw plays. They're just trying to get a couple yards, make it a little bit easier for their punters. You know what he's doing? He's, hey, let's just go deep. Let's throw it 50 yards down the field. It's 3rd and 16. We'll get some yards and we'll move forward. And they've been effective doing that. So it's pretty exciting. Did
you just coin a new term?
Sun and Gun? No, I didn't. It was actually, that was on AAF Twitter. So somebody else, I believe, coined that term. It was not me.
The Sun and Gun. I love it.
Yep. So everybody's in play. Charles Johnson, Jalen Marshall is my favorite play. I think there's going to be a lot of ownership on Charles Johnson, and rightfully so. He had a huge week last week.
Yeah, he won me all my money.
Yeah, but here's the concern. He's going to be super chalky. He left the first game with an injury after the first half, and he looked banged up after every catch that he made. It looked like he was hurting. So there's always a possibility that he doesn't play the full game, or that he just has a failure of a game, because that thing happens with these guys. So I love Jalen Marshall as a guy that can take advantage of that. And if you see Charles Johnson play the whole game, Jalen Marshall's still going to get his. So, and I don't have a problem going to Akeem Hunt. He didn't get a lot of rushes, but I think it was a game flow situation. Same thing that was good for Stacy last week in their matchup, I thought was bad for Akeem Hunt in their matchup. Orlando did not get out in front. They were behind to San Antonio. They had to play catch up. They weren't really effective in the short game. So Akeem Hunt looked really, really good in week 1, not so much in week 2. And that could have been just because Atlanta is that bad. But Orlando is giving up 14.5 points here. Man, that is a really, really tough point spread to take. But I'm going to take it. I'm going to take Orlando minus the 14.5. Let's move in. We've got the Birmingham Iron visiting the Atlanta Legends, and we have something of a flowchart situation here. The Iron are -6. They haven't looked all that impressive in their 2 wins. They haven't really played anybody, but then again, Atlanta is not anybody to worry about. They are a team that seems to just give up yards to the running back, and Birmingham has the only bell cow running back in the league. This is going to be the only time, probably this year, that I say Trent Richardson is by far a lock and load, must play kind of guy. He's been getting 20-plus touches if they're going to include him into the passing game, which they did last week as opposed to Ladarius Perkins, which hurt us. There's no way that you can't play him. On the Atlanta side, not a lot going on. I think Wadley as the running back got a bunch of targets and made him viable. But outside of those 2 guys, I don't really like anybody in this game. Quentin Patton has gotten the majority of the target share for Birmingham, but I don't think he's very good. So they're just better wide receivers, specifically at a $6,300 price tag, that I would prefer to go to as opposed to Quentin Patton. So I'm locking and loading Trent Richardson. If you have 10 lineups in that tournament, I'd say that Richardson should be in 8, 9. And listen, if you put them in all 10, I wouldn't call you crazy. I would tell you that's probably a smart move. Not something that I would do, but I'd have them in 8 or 9 of those lineups.
What do you think of LaDainian Washington? Because it looked like he was getting a lot of targets in that second week.
Well, I don't really think that the Birmingham Iron passing game is something that I really want to bank on. I mean, he only had 4 targets. So, you could play him. He's at $4,600, but I think there are better options at that $4,600 price point. Sure, in a GPP, somebody like him who's not going to have a lot of ownership, if he goes off and catches 2 touchdowns, he's going to win it for you. But you don't need to go that deep into these GPPs because they're not as big as what you're going to find on, DraftKings or FanDuel when you're doing normal NFL style GPPs, or even hockey or basketball for that matter. They're just not the size, so you don't need to go that crazy with them. You can play Patton, but again, he's not somebody that I'm really looking at. I think his price is a little bit too expensive. It's Trent Richardson and only Trent Richardson in this game for me.
Okay.
The most interesting game, though, is going to be a rematch of the San Antonio and San Diego game. San Antonio really seemed to find their stride last week against Orlando. Despite losing, the offense looked really good. Logan Woodside, looked good. He was passing the ball. Maybe it was the addition of DeMarcus Ayers, who I think is a better option than Patton for a couple $100 cheaper. I also think that there's going to be reduced ownership on Mikael McKay, who's been a target monster, had a bunch of passes in the red zone that just, even in the end zone, that he couldn't complete last week, had a touchdown called back. I really, really like McKay this week. And then, the favorite of the podcast here, Jaquan Gardner.
Yeah.
He's up at $7,000, though. It's pretty expensive.
Wow. Yeah, he really got bumped up.
So the thing is that he was splitting some carries, but what I liked about the end of that game was that it seemed like after he broke his big run, he was at 98 yards. He needed to come out. He was tired. He couldn't play the next two downs. But on third down, it seemed like Martz got him in there and called a play specifically for him to try and get him 2 yards. They didn't really need a touchdown at that point. They were just going to run a third down. They were inside the 10. They ran a draw play, and he was able to convert not just the 2 yards, but get in for a second touchdown and get his 100 yards. So I like Jaquan Gardner. I also like Kenneth Farrow, who didn't look good in week 1, but I thought ran much, much better in week 2. And so, I really like him, but he's getting up there in price. So there's a lot of running backs that, I guess you could go to, and I feel like most of my lineups end up having 2 or 3 running backs in them, and it comes down to a lot of these wide receivers in this league. The biggest problem that the league has, to me, is not just suspect quarterback play, but when the quarterback does put an accurate pass on the receiver's hands, they're just dropping the ball way too much.
Yeah, I always think of Stonehands from Necessary Roughness, the movie. Where he can't catch anything.
and that's what it looks like, in a league that isn't very efficient in the first place with their players and their play calling, because the talent is what it is. You've got to capitalize on those situations when you have them, and hopefully it gets better. Hopefully the first 2 weeks are as bad as it gets, but as we move forward, we'll see. I mean, I don't think that it can continue at a 16% drop rate, which it has. A couple other guys in this game, though, that are GPP options, a little bit more so than in other ones. You can go with any of these guys at the wide receiver: Mikael McKay, DeMarcus Ayers, Brian Brown, Greg Ward Jr., Dantes Ford, Alonzo Moore, Nelson Spruce, or Gavin Escobar. So there's a lot of viability in this game. My concern is San Diego was primarily a passing team for the first 6 quarters of the league. The last 2 quarters were where they were the most effective, and it was just simply running the ball, pounding it with Jaquan Gardner, with Terrell Watson. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing here and how they end up distributing the play calls going against San Antonio. I just don't think that they have a lot of confidence in Philip Nelson or any of the quarterbacks on their roster, and so they've had to go to that run despite that not really being what Mike Martz wants to do.
Good old Mike Martz.
Yeah, so on this one they have the fleet -2, and I think the home field advantage in a lot of cases has been huge in the AAF, but I'm going with the Commanders. Give me the points on that, and then give me the Birmingham Iron -6. So we're going Hot Shots, Apollos, Iron, and Commanders. I think the top 4 teams in the league versus, the bottom 4. So that's where we're at. I'll have a complete write-up on this, a little bit more in depth on the fanball pricing and kind of options that you have with the strategies that we can move into. Hopefully we can get that out tomorrow.
All right, so you covered pretty much the top people, right? So Trent Richardson, Lock and Load. Where am I saving salary? Who's my low end guy so I can play all these upper level guys?
Akram Wadley is at 4,300. I think he's a very viable play. He had a bunch of targets last week. He kind of took over the Atlanta backfield. In my write-up, I had said Terrion Falston looked awful, and he looked awful in week one, and the coaches saw it. So Wadley ended up having, I think it was versus receiving. I think he had like 8 or 9 targets. Became very viable from that standpoint. So he's a guy down at 4,300. I think you can go into. Davion Smith, a running back out of Orlando, doesn't get a lot of rushes, not a lot of attempts, but what he does get is all the carries within the 5 yards. So 5 attempts in week 1, 4 attempts in week 2, but a touchdown in both of those, and adds a couple catches. So 11-1 and 11-4 in terms of fantasy totals. And he's a 4,000 salary guy. So there are a couple guys that are pretty cheap. David Cobb down at 3,400 got a bunch of opportunities to try and rush the ball in within, when they were within the 5-yard line, but was unable to capitalize on any of them. So it doesn't really show it in his game log that he had those. But I would say last week of those 7 carries, at least I want to say like 3 or 4 of them were right on the goal line. He just wasn't able to get in. So, you're taking a shot on him, but that's kind of what a $3,400 salary kind of indicates. The other guy I think that you could go back to is Ladarius Perkins. I mean, he played last week. It just didn't seem like when he was in the game, they were looking to pass it to the running back or run it to they were looking on the opposite side of the field that where he was. So I think you could go back to him, and I think he'd be a little bit sneaky. He's down at 3,100.
Yeah, I was surprised at how often they were throwing the Trent Richardson last week.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised at how little they did in week 1 because he was generally very, very open, and he actually seems like he does a lot better when he's being targeted. He's a little bit more open. He's got some room to go. He doesn't break a ton of tackles in the first place, so getting him in some space gives him the ability to get more than 2 or 3 yards. And it's just a little bit less predictable than the first and second down runs that the defense is keen in on. And he's having a hard time. He's not a great running back to begin with, but when these guys can predict that he's going to be the guy getting the ball and it's going to be a run to the right, to the left, whatever the case is, it's going to make it even harder for him.
All right, so here's a lineup question for you. Jalen Marshall or Rashad Ross?
I think you got to go Rashad Ross. If you're just doing one lineup, Rashad Ross has been the higher volume of the two. I love Jalen Marshall as a kind of a pivot or a leverage from Charles Johnson. But, if I had to pick one in a one lineup situation, it's Rashad Ross. He's 1A, 1B in terms of wide receivers, him and Charles Johnson in the league.
All right. I am going to put him in.
It's kind of fun. I'm recognizing a lot of these names from either guys that flamed out in the NFL. Devion Smith was a Michigan guy. I think Jalen Marshall played at Ohio State at receiver, right? It's kind of like the who's who of like what happened to this guy from a couple of years ago. I recognize him from NCAA football.
Well, and what they tried to do, so the way that the league was formed was they had a draft and they drafted the quarterbacks. They tried to fill in the rest of the guys on the teams from a collegiate level, guys that played in that area. So, the Salt Lake team is going to have a lot of guys that went to the University of Utah, BYU, that type of stuff, whereas Birmingham has a ton of Alabama guys. Somehow it seems like a lot of the Michigan and Midwest guys got put with Orlando. I'm not really sure how that all worked, but also if these guys were attached to pro teams, they tried to do the same type of thing in terms of geographically putting them there to gain some extra interest in the league.
Yeah, I see Denard Robinson's running back for Atlanta, Adam.
Yeah, he was a healthy scratch last week. He didn't look very effective in week 1, so I wouldn't expect to see him playing a ton because he didn't look good. But you'll recognize some of the names. Matt Asiata is over on Salt Lake. For some reason, he was split out wide at one point on third down as a wide receiver last week.
He's so bad.
I saw you talking about that in the group message. I'm like, Asiata, isn't he a big bruiser?
It was like there was a design pass play to him. There was a penalty. This is like on 3rd and 12. It was a design pass play out to the flat. There was a penalty, false start or delay a game or something like that. So they brought it back 5 yards, and he was split out wide. And I just I can't understand the reasoning behind that. It doesn't make sense at all.
What do you think of Brandon Oliver this week? He seemed to be getting the ball a lot last week.
I love Brandon Oliver on the unofficial depth chart released by the team. So we're not, the AAF world's not really sure what an official depth chart is. He was listed ahead of Bawano for the first time all season. So I think he's going to get the first runs like he did last week. So certainly available, especially at the price that he's at for playability.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Adam. I think I cut you off there.
No, I think wasn't Brandon Oliver a Charger at one point in time?
Yeah.
For him filling in a couple of years ago. He was like a late in the season ad for me, and he blew up, and I can't remember who he was playing, but he got all the touches. He's like a little short guy, but he scored late to win my matchup. I remember celebrating that one. So he always holds a special place in my heart.
He looked really good last week. That was the one game I really got to watch, and he looked really good. I was like, wow, I can't believe he's playing in this and not a backup somewhere in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, at 4,500, he's certainly a nice salary. I mean, I think that puts him at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th most expensive running back, and I think he's going to have a bigger role than Terrell Watson or Dearness Johnson. So, and even Bawano on his own team, which is higher, $1,000 more than him. So, I like him very much at that price. I don't know if he's the guy that I'm going to put in there, but certainly in consideration, if you're making 10 lineups, he should probably have some significant ownership at that point.
All right. Any last thoughts on AAF?
No, I mean, if you're looking for one game to watch and you haven't really had the opportunity to do it, make it a point to watch the Orlando games. They're just the most fun offense. Arizona was hit or miss, so it's hard to kind of recommend them just based off of how they started last week. But Orlando is just chucking the ball downfield with reckless abandon. Like I said, 3rd and 15, let's air it out 50 yards and let's go get it. So watch the Orlando games. Those are going to be the most exciting ones, at least that offensive is doing something that, you can watch that's not just a ground and pound or drop balls. They seem competent enough.
One thing I found really interesting, and this is just kind of a funny thing I found, is so on the AAF website they broadcast all the games. So if you're in a pinch, you can go there, but it's literally the raw feed. So there's no announcers. It's just the crowd and following the camera. The camera angles are all the same as the TV, but they don't have any of the announcers or anything, and it's really weird to watch it without an announcer going. It almost feels like you're on mute.
Yeah, and you know what? I watched one for quite a bit. The only problem is that when they went to there was a turnover, and they were going to review the turnover, and they don't have the angles in that broadcast. So I went and found a feed for the TNT broadcast at that point.
Yeah, because it's literally just the main feed. That's it. They don't have all the additional TV cameras or the overheads or anything. It's a really weird way to watch the game, but if you need to, you can pick it up that way. And they flip the camera based on who's on offense. So the offense is always going south to north on your TV screen, on your computer screen. It's really weird. I found it interesting, but disconcerting at the same time. Just one of those weird things I picked up. Anyways, we're Draught for Upside. We're broadcasting live on the Legend Sports Network at LennyMelnickFantasySports.com. You can find us at DrauhtForUpside.com. And our sponsor this year is I'mABeerHound.com. Lots of .coms. So where do you guys want to go next? Should we got NBA tomorrow. I know, Adam, you're here to talk PGA. Do you want to get into that, and then we can fill the end in with some NBA and baseball?
It's up to you guys. I mean, we could go NBA. Post All-Star break starting back up tomorrow would be cool. It's It's up to you guys. I can talk a little NBA. I have not been following from a DFS perspective as much, so that might be more on Chris. But I'm up for whatever you guys want.
Sure, we can take a real brief look at the NBA here. I haven't really dug deep into it. A lot of things, just looking at the salaries is the biggest thing. Is just trying to find these inaccuracies in the pricing. Who's underpriced, and that's who we're going to target. A couple guys that I've looked at so far is in that Phoenix Cleveland game. Both teams are really bad. Just bad overall. Bad at offense, bad at defense, just bad at everything. And I think they're trying to be, so that's okay. It's not a knock on them. They're probably good people and good friends and fathers and brothers and sisters and whatnot. But when it comes to playing basketball, most of them are not very good. I do like the point guard for Cleveland, Colin Sexton, priced down at 4,900 on DK. That's just too cheap given the way that he's been playing, the points that he's been putting up. We're looking for the guy to do 5-6x, ideally 7-8-9. In his last 10 games, 39, 28, 27, 37, 41, 21, 19, 15, 20, 27. So that 4,900 price tag against a questionable Phoenix team is something that I'm certainly looking to target. Let's see. I know that Embiid is going to be out, and so that bumps up Butler, Tobias, maybe even a little bit of Boban and Ben Simmons. It'll be interesting because typically when you have one of your big studs that demands a tremendous amount of usage, it's easy to figure out where that usage is going to go based on, the history of that team and what's happened before when the guy's been out. But we really haven't had this team together in its current form for more than a couple games. So who's going to get the extra usage out of this? It's pretty difficult to say, but they're all priced accordingly as if Embiid was in. So you could probably take one or two of those guys and feel pretty safe that they're going to exceed their value because of the extra usage that they're going to get. All right, moving on. Another guy that I like that I think is priced a little bit lower and his price is starting to come down is De'Aaron Fox playing Golden State. He's down at 7,100. He has not been playing as good. But everybody in that Sacramento backcourt is probably going to benefit from Shumpert being out for 2 games. So De'Aaron Fox, Bogdanovich, Buddy Hield, these are all guys that I would seriously take a look at tomorrow. I mean, and DraftKings has a huge tournament, $100,000 a first, $5 entry. Certainly something that you can go ahead and have a little bit of better odds than buying a $5 scratch-off ticket, I think, but pretty similar in effect. So you got to be perfect in the NBA, and you got to be perfect in a tournament like that. But I think Fox has the ability to, definitely pay off his salary, and he's somebody that I'll be taking a look at pretty thoroughly.
What do you got there, Adam?
I like De'Aaron Fox a lot as a player. I think he's really coming into his own second year. He's getting a lot of good usage, isn't he, Chris?
Yeah, and I liked Fox. I heard a couple interviews with him pre-draft 2 years ago, and I really liked Fox. I liked him significantly more than a lot of the other guys in that draft class. And last year, he really just it didn't seem like he put it together, but this year he has started to do so. So yeah, as a player, as a fantasy asset, the whole thing with Sacramento is they like to run, they play fast, they shoot the ball a lot, they don't play a lot of defense, and that makes for a good fantasy equation. The other guy that I really like price-wise, who has not been playing very well, is Devin Booker. Again, that Phoenix-Cleveland game, but Devin Booker has come down to 7,700, and justifiably so. His fantasy totals of 27, 45, 35, 60, 57, 31, 42, 31, pretty volatile. So he's a guy that I like at that price tag because he can certainly pay it off. He can certainly crash and burn too, but that's the kind of guy that you're looking to win a GPP with. If everybody was guaranteed, then everybody would play him and you wouldn't have the leverage. Let's move into kind of like the forwards.
Yeah, I love those guys in shootouts like that. And guys like Booker that he could very easily just control the game as far as his usage against a crappy team like Cleveland. could easily turn into a game where we've seen in the past where he can just put up monster games on his own without much help from his teammates. So I like targeting guys like that.
Well, yeah, and TJ Warren has been announced out already, so the usage that he would have had in the starting lineup will be distributed elsewhere. Typically, Booker is a guy that's going to take a lot of that. Josh Jackson, Bridges. So there's a couple guys in that lineup, but certainly Booker has the ability to go off for 40 or 50 points, just real points, not counting assists or rebounds, steals, blocks, that type of stuff. So when you have that type of 40-point ceiling in terms of your actual points, you can not only just pay off your salary with points, but everything else is, just icing on that cake at that point. Let's see. Guy we targeted a lot pre-All-Star, Marquise Chris, is at 4,500 in that game. Probably not going to go there. I know Kevin Love will still be on a minutes limit, but I expect him to play a little bit more than he did pre-All-Star break. And here's a guy that probably will be a little bit popular amongst casuals, at least. Joe Harris winning the three-point contest. He's been very consistent all year, 4,300. That just seems like a cheap price for him. He's one of the guys on that Brooklyn team that does get consistently over 30 minutes and usually can pay off a 43. It's just too cheap for him. I'm in on Joe Harris unless the minute projections has that rotation going pretty deep. But even then, at 4,300, it's hard to get away from him. I mean, that's all I got right now. We can go in a little bit more in depth tomorrow as, in first sip and talk a little bit about this. I haven't had a significant time to go through some of these matchups, some of these games with the AAF, the hockey, and everything else that we've got going on. So why don't we hop into the PGA, the WGC?
Are you ready, Adam?
Oh, yeah. Always ready to talk some PGA.
All right, so this week we have the WGC Mexico Championship. And, just an update, Dylan Larkin just scored from Anthony Mantha, so double points for me.
Those are my boys.
All right, so this is another POA course. So it sets up very well with the Genesis Open from last week. Now, what I found interesting about this course, so it's a par 71, 7,300 yards, but it's in Mexico City. It's 7,500 feet above sea level, which means the ball actually travels 9 to 10% further than on a sea level course. So if you adjust for all that, the course is only 6,700 yards. Just one of those interesting things I find with courses like these. So in my models, at least, this is a narrow course, lots of trees along the roughs. So you have narrow fairways, narrow roughs, and then trees. So I think it's about driving accuracy rather than distance, especially with the elevations. So I'm looking at a lot of approach into this. And adjust for POA putters, so that's Lefty and Kuchar and them. They love these type of courses. I don't know, Adam. What's your thought on the course itself?
Yeah, I think a lot of your points are pretty spot on. If you look at the scorecard and make the mistake of seeing a 7,300 yard course and then start weighing your stat categories based on a longer golf course, you're making a mistake because, as you said, it only plays effectively at 6,700. So I'm targeting a lot of guys that I would not be targeting if it was a course played at sea level in the 7,300 range. So there's some guys that I really like that are trending very well with their strokes gained approach and putt well on these types of greens. There's some interesting notes, too, on this course. There's a lot that's been said about it being more of a European-style golf course. In the last couple of years, that's really kind of bared out. They've played this course. This is the third time now at the Golf Club de Chapultepec in Mexico.
I was waiting for you to say it because I didn't want to even try to pronounce that.
I got you covered there. I've heard this pronounced way too many times the last couple of days in the last few years coming to this event. But in the first year, 11 of the 22 top finishers were actually predominantly European Tour players. And then last year, 8 of the top 17 as well. So I am kind of giving a slight lean when the stats are there, slight lean towards the European Tour players, because this course tends to be a little bit more favorable for their style of play and a little more comparable to some of the courses they play on a regular basis.
Yeah, I saw there's a lot of Asian Tour players coming in this year too. So I think it fits well too, because they have a lot of narrow fairway courses and POA greens over there too.
Yeah, this is the WGC events are all based on world ranking points. So you'll see some of your guys from the Japanese tour that you normally wouldn't see, like your Shugo Imahiras and Satoshi Kodairas and those types of guys. Kodaira won on the PGA Tour last year at Harbortown, I believe. But you'll see some of these guys that you really haven't seen a whole lot of. And that's in some cases where you can take advantage, like European Tour guys, especially this week. I'll be targeting in that lower end because I think a lot of them are very, very underpriced. So we'll talk about utilizing those here in a little bit. But definitely wait on accuracy. It's an approach course. You know, a lot of the guys like your Woodlands and your DJs, they're clubbing down off the tee because they can still hit a freaking long iron out there over 300 yards. And then they're, just focusing more on, where they're going to be hitting their approaches from.
Yeah, I saw somebody interviewing Tiger today because he's down there practicing, and he hit a 3-wood 330 yards or 340 yards or something like that.
Yeah, he's actually added some loft on his driver and 3-wood this week because the higher altitude you are, the more efficiently the ball flies through the air. So you actually want a little bit higher trajectory with your longer clubs. It's going to be a fun week. I mean, if you love drilling over guys that are bombing it out there 380 yards with the driver, then this is your week.
Yeah, it looks like this is a 12:30 lock time.
Yeah, I believe 12:30 Eastern time tomorrow. And the tee times get moved a little bit later, too, because I think it's around 75 total players in the field. So it's a smaller field. They don't need to crowd them out like they do.
Yeah, that was the other thing I forgot to mention, too. It's 72 players, and there's no cut. So all 72 players are playing the 4 rounds, which in my mind means some of the lower-end players are in play now, that you don't have to worry about them missing the cut.
Yeah, especially if there's guys down at the bottom end that you like that are birdie makers, that maybe like you were just talking about Devin Booker in the NBA, maybe their outputs are a little more volatile, but if you feel like it's a guy who can have a week where he pops, there's a lot less risk involved when there's not going to miss the cut if they have a bad first or second round. And some of those guys in these events, like you might see them finish 30th or 35th, but if they have one crappy round and they're just bombing birdies in the rest of the week, they might finish 30th or 35th, but they might be top 20 in DK scoring and down in that 7,000 range. That can really be the difference in a winning lineup in GPPs.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you a tipsy pick later that is good. People are gonna think are kind of crazy, but I really like it.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm on my second Imperial IPA at this point, around 8%. So I might have another good one last week to follow up on Patrick Rogers from last week too.
Yeah, I'm about to crack open a Hop Slam before I really get into that Imperial Stout. So,
do we have any recaps of last week's tipsy picks or our favorites and all that, or is that normally the Danger's forte?
Yeah, Danger tracks all that stuff. That's what he likes doing. But unfortunately, he's not here. He's at a trade show for the beer world. Must be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. I picked JB Holmes to win it. Outperform my value, everything. It was like I 100%. That's how I recall it. So if he wrote it down, that's that's a whole nother thing. We don't record this, do we? Like you couldn't actually go back.
Yeah, you guys heard me bitching on the chat, man. I had JB Holmes in my lineup and I pulled him out at the last minute. I was so pissed.
Yeah, it was the guy that we talked about too. I know we chatted him up a little bit because he has great course history. I mentioned him and said, I don't hate playing him, and then I went ahead and didn't do it at all myself, of course.
Yeah, and I'm a course history guy, which is why I had him in there originally, and then I'm like, no, I got to get away from this course history thing.
You got to stay on brand, man. You got to stay on brand. That's when you kick yourself most, and you're like, damn it, all the signs I look at are pointing to him, and I didn't do it.
I will say, I don't know if you guys saw the chatter on it, but there was quite a bit of shade thrown at JB Holmes, especially for how long it takes him to play in general. There was a couple tweets about it, and I guess the announcers were talking about it during the match as well.
Did you see the tweet of him hugging his kid? So there was a tweet. I guess he found out that the morning before he won it that his wife was pregnant again, and then they showed a picture on Twitter. He was hugging his 2-year-old son. And he's like, and the tweet was, "This is the first time he's ever seen his 2-year-old son because it takes him so long."
I did see that, and you guys can rest assured, pretty much anything golf related, PGA Tour event related, I'm probably going to be looking at. So I definitely saw the shade thrown at JB, and he's a guy that I want to root for. He's like the same age range. I mean, tooting my own horn here, but I played some college events that he was also involved in when he was at Kentucky, and he was always a bomber. He's a guy that I would love to root for, but it's tough to watch him on a Sunday. I think I can handle slow players. I play with a lot of deliberate players myself, and it doesn't bother me that much. But when a guy doesn't begin his routine, like when the two guys in his group, JT and Adam Scott, were basically greenside pitching up to the green, and he had like a 25-footer that he was getting ready for. He didn't even start his routine until after those guys hit their shots, and that's a perfect time where you can take that 30 seconds to a minute while those guys are setting up and hitting to go through your own routine, your own process, and be a step ahead once it is your turn. So there were some things that definitely bothered me watching that broadcast on Sunday. But I think overall, just like most things on Twitter and social media, it was kind of blown out of proportion. The guy earned the victory. I mean, JT kind of fell apart, but kudos to JB for stepping up and taking advantage.
So let me ask you, does he always play that slow? I mean, or was this just an extra slow thing? I just know, like, hey,
yeah.
I like reveling in my victories as well. So, you know, the couple nights that I bing some big GPPs in NBA or baseball, I usually open a couple extra drinks and I stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and I actually wait till it gets paid out. Partially just because, hey, I just want to enjoy that moment. I mean, could it have been something along those lines, or is he just always just that deliberate and that slow?
No, he tends to be that slow, and I hear you too. Like when I had my fantasy season-long championship clinched, I was watching that Sunday night game, and it was like Doug Baldwin just racking up touchdowns and making my margin of victory greater. But I was basically just sitting there, like enjoying the moment, toasting to myself for winning the league. So I get that, but he's kind of always been that way. It's especially been bad the last couple of years. He got a lot of heat last year at the Farmers at Torrey. He was playing in the final group with Alex Noren, and Noren, I think, was tied for the lead, had a second shot into the par 5, 18th, which we just played, I think, last week or the week before. And JB was up first, and he took so long deliberating over his shot. And he was, I think, a shot or two back, so he knew he needed to either birdie or eagle. And then he freaking lays up, and then he yanks it in the rough, and then Noren bombs one over the green, ends up not getting up and down, goes into a playoff with Jason Day. So JB took a lot of heat that day. And I saw some jokes that were like targeted from Alex Noren's perspective because of that experience last year where JB was taking a whole bunch of heat. But yeah, he's always been that way. He took a lot of shit for it last year, about a year ago. And then that came to the forefront. Like anytime he contends, it's just a tough watch on Sunday. You know, I don't want to root against him, but I'm not rooting for him to be in the final group. That's for sure.
So who are some of our top targets for this week? I mean, where are you guys going? I've done, like I was telling Mark, I've done about 1,000 words of research for just one article, and really didn't have any picks. It's just, hey, small field, this is a strategy, these are two guys, and kind of that's where I'm at. So I need at least four other guys if I go with their 2 picks. Where are we going?
I always like starting with who I'm hearing talked up most. And the obvious odds-on favorite is at the top of the price list, which is JT at 11.8. He's coming in with ridiculous form. If you're looking at strokes gained approach as your main statistic, and he's also finished well here the last 2 seasons, 5th in 2017, 2nd last year in that playoff against Phil. This was the event. I'm not sure if you guys were watching as much PGA at that time, but JT holed out from like 120 or so yards on 18. He was a couple holes ahead because he just charged he charged on Sunday on the back nine, and holes out from like a $120, $125, ends up in a playoff with Phil, and then Phil gets his first victory in several years. So it was a pretty memorable event. But I think because of that, a lot of people are going to be on him up top. Who were the two picks that you said you honed in on based on the articles you read?
They said Fleetwood, which I thought was funny, and Grillo. Grillo was the guy, depending on ownership, of course. He looked to be a good value here, but they did warn that if ownership got too high, it was probably a guy you want to get away from.
Yeah, especially in the bottom end. I think Grillo's like 6,900. He's a guy that his putting can go cold in a heartbeat, and that really kind of filters down to the rest of his game. When you keep missing putts, it almost puts more pressure on the rest of your game. So you feel like you have to stuff it in tight if you're going to have a good chance at birdie. So if he's high owned, I love him at 6,900 as a value play, but I'm not going to be able to play him in tournaments because there's some guys down there that could just as easily pop. But up top, I love DJ as a pivot play from JT. He plays really well on. Now I rated this out on Fantasy National, and I did it basically on under 7,200 yard courses, which this effectively plays as. And DJ was actually the top guy overall for that course length on POA greens. And he's actually been trending pretty well with his ball striking. His putting's just been off a little bit, but he tends to putt pretty well on POA. He's fifth in the field strokes gained on POA greens in particular over the last 24 rounds. So he's a guy that I'm targeting as a nice pivot play off of JT. When you're going up top, I mean, the top guy is always going to be in the 20+% range as far as ownership. So if we can get DJ at 15%, somewhere in that range, I think he's sandwiched right between JT, who just, barely missed out on winning last week with a fade on the back nine. And then Rory kind of charged a little bit late until faltering the last couple holes. He was right below him. And Rahm, too. I mean, doesn't have great course history here. He's 20th last year, third the year before, so he's decent. But I think a lot of people are going to want to play him, too, with the way his stats are trending. So it could be another week where DJ just kind of swag walks his way to the victory. So I love him as a pivot play up top to start with.
Yeah, the two on my model too, because I fell in love with Fantasy National today, so I spent hours just playing with models.
Yeah, I've got mine up right now. It's addicting, isn't it?
Oh, it is. There's so many things you can do.
Yep.
But my two that came out were Rory was number one and DJ was number two. Within a few minor tweaks, they could go either way. And so I really like those two. In JT, of course, I will mix into a few lineups. Now, the projected highest owned player right now is Xander.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard him talked up a little bit. He finished 18th last year. He's definitely a birdie maker. I don't hate the Xander play, but there's a guy just below him that we'll talk about in a minute. The one that's going to be interesting on the ownership perspective and then how he adjusts this week. Bryson's never played here before. It's amazing to think back a year ago that Bryson wasn't even ranked highly enough in the world rankings to be qualified for this WGC event. Because now you look at his last 9 months since the Memorial, which he won in May, he's won 5 times worldwide now. Like, Bryson has more wins worldwide than anybody else in the game of golf. It's pretty incredible to see the trajectory his career is on. But he's a guy, he always, if you heard him a couple of weeks ago in Dubai, he was trying to calculate air density and trying to talk to his caddy about how the true distance was going to play. He's going to be a guy who I think either figures it out and pops and finishes like top 4 or 5, or he maybe has a hard time adjusting to the difference in altitude and maybe struggles a little bit.
Yeah, see, where I'm worried about him, and I've been looking at him a lot this week, is his putting. He putted like crap at Genesis on the POAs. He's not really that high ranked on the POA greens, and I don't know. I'm kind of scared of that because it looked like, at least at the Genesis, man, he was calculating his approaches, his chips, and everything, and then he'd miss a fairly easy putt for these professionals.
Yeah, his putting can be a little hot and cold. The thing is, when his ball striking is on and he gets the long game figured out, I mean, he's as good of a ball striker as there is tee to green. So he can put it literally within 10 feet or less on the majority of holes if he gets his ball striking going. So he's a guy that I don't mind targeting here. Like, his recent stats actually haven't trended as well as you might expect over the last 24 rounds, but he's a guy that if he finds something on the range on Tuesday or Wednesday, and he goes out there on Thursday and starts clicking, he could lap any field. I mean, he's that good when he's on.
Hey, let me ask you this. I've got a real question here, and then I'm going to fill in for danger and have a themed lineup that is ridiculous. So, what about Ian Poulter? What do you think of him as a legitimate play?
I'm trying not to let my biases, weigh into my response here, but I think he's a little bit overpriced at 7,900. There are some guys from the Euro Tour and even guys that have been playing very well on the PGA Tour that are priced below him, like Rafa Cabrera-Bello from the European Tour. He's playing a little more in the States this year, but Charles Howell, Matt Kuchar, like how are these guys below Poulter in price? I don't know. Poulter's not a guy that I'm super high on this week. He hasn't played this course before, so it's going to be a bit of an adjustment for him. He won last year in Texas, which I think jumped his world rankings high enough. He had a good stretch of golf last year, which got him into it, but he hasn't played here before. Don't particularly love his form coming in. I don't know. I'm just kind of lukewarm on him.
All right. And so, to fill in for danger, he always has these theme lineups. Like,
for sure.
I know somebody on Twitter put together guys made of wood, like with woodland and everything. But, I have a whole different angle here. Like, can we make a lineup of, like, the biggest D-bags on tour? You could start it off with Matt Kuchar. You got Patrick Reed there.
Yeah.
Who else could we put in there that would be biased?
Sergio.
Yeah, you know what? I was thinking Sergio, too. He's right there on the screen. So, we're halfway there. That's pretty easy.
If you're going D-bag, like Poulter might head that list, to be honest with you, at least from an American Ryder Cup team's perspective.
Yeah, it sounds like you do have a little bit of hate for him, a little bit of animosity, and I can understand the anger because I want to tell you guys right now that the Blackhawks are leading the Red Wings 2-1. The Blackhawks have scored twice, and my game that I have four Blackhawks in, none of them have a point. Not a shot, not a block shot, nothing.
Yeah,
so
didn't have a single one of those players that were involved in either of those goals.
Yeah, well, hey, at least you had Dylan Larkin on your team, okay?
All right, we can continue with the all douchebag team, but I did actually fit one of the Red Wings yesterday who will not be named at this point for a new driver. I gained him about 20 yards on his big stick, so that's fun. All right, so maybe he'll be on tour instead of playing the NHL. Who knows? Yeah, Patrick Reed's definitely on the all douchebag team. Let me scroll down a little bit more. Billy Horschel might be an honorable mention, or maybe our sixth guy that we add on. I'm not sure if we'll be able to fit all of these guys because some of them are kind of like mid to high priced.
How many of these guys are actually legitimate plays too? Looking at Patrick Reed, he looks like and I'm just looking at some basic birdie stats here. He looks decent. Kuchar looks decent.
I actually like Reed this week. I like Reed this week quite a bit. He putts well on POA. His approach game is where he thrives when he's playing well, and he's coming in. It's like the out of sight, out of mind thing. He hasn't been playing much the last couple of weeks. He hasn't looked great so far this year, but he's a guy whose form can pop in a heartbeat. So I don't mind Reed at all this week. I think he's a good mid-price play that could really pay off for you at 8,000. His course history is not great. He's kind of been spotty here, but with the emphasis on the approaches, I think he's a guy that I might like a lot. Sergio, though, if he's on the all douchebag team after blowing up 5 greens in Saudi Arabia a couple weeks ago, and by the way, that guy owes Matt Kuchar at least a thank you card of some sort or a gift package with flowers and chocolates for his wife, because he should have been taking all the heat last week for getting disqualified on the European Tour, and he should probably be suspended when it comes down to it. And just throwing a fit like a child. The guy's freaking 40 or 38 years old. Like, what are you doing, man? He should have been blasted last week in his first event in the States, but Kuchar took all the heat because of Caddygate from Mexico last fall when he won his first event in however many years.
So what'd Sergey do?
Sergio, a couple weeks ago in Saudi Arabia, he was so pissed off at the condition of the greens that he basically took his putter and his foot, depending on which hole it was, and scraped up the greens, took some chunks out, threw a fit, like basically blasted the bunker a few times with his sand wedge. Looked like a petulant little child, to be honest with you. I've never been a huge Sergio fan, but that kind of put me over the edge. He's up there, top 3 on the all douchebag team.
That's horrible. I mean, the one thing as a golfer is no matter the condition of the course, you treat the course well.
Yeah. And it got to the point where the 5 groups behind him all complained about the condition of the greens because they had to putt through and chip through the
damage.
Yeah, the damage that he had done to those greens. So, yeah, he should have taken a lot more heat last week than he did. But with that being said, I can separate that. I actually like him as a play this week. He is number 1 long-term in strokes gained, tee to green. His putting can be very, very hot and cold, mostly cold. But if his putting pops at 8K, I think he's going to be a popular play too.
Yeah, he's been talking about how much he likes this course too.
Yeah, I know people love to jump on that when someone's like what was his name? Scott Piercy at the Sony was another example of that. He always talks about how that's his favorite course and this and that, and he didn't finish top 30. Like these guys, it can be your favorite course, but if you're not in form and you can't hit the shots that you need to score, it doesn't matter.
All right,
I actually like.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was gonna say I like Reed a lot as a part of the all douchebag team to be a great pivot play from Sergio this week because I think he is going to be high owned. Same price at 8K.
Yeah, you're listening to Draught For Upside, and we're brought to you on the Legends Sports Network by I'mABeerHound.com, and we're talking about the PGA Mexico Championship. And just Chris, really quick, Chicago's second line just scored. So Strome and Depernicat, Gustafson. So there's some points for us. The Red Wings are getting destroyed, though.
Not on my
Wings just got stoned point blank too. Jesus. Who was that? That was Mantha, my boy too. God.
This is not good for Howard's trade value either. So yeah, we're losing on a lot of fronts here.
Yeah. All right. So, any final thoughts on the PGA douchebag team for this week?
Yeah, I'm actually scrolling down to find some douchebag value here. Tyrell Hatton's a guy that can run a little bit hot, but I actually love him. He's very self-aware. He realizes he's a bit of a hothead douchebag and can come across that way on the course. Scrolling the lower end, Keegan Bradley's a bit of a douche too. He's like that entitled New England Patriots fan guy. He's got a stupid swing that I hate. Let's see if we can find a high price guy at the top end here who might be. A lot of people think that Bryson's a douchebag, but I think he's just kind of a misunderstood guy. I don't know. I'm not going to say Phil because that's my own biases creeping in.
No, he's kind of a douche.
Yeah, he's a bit of. Bubba Watson. Watson. There we go. All right, so we got Bubba, Patrick Reed, Sergio Garcia, Ian Poulter. Billy Horschel will go with at 7,700, and then do we got a value douchebag?
We got to have somebody for value.
I don't think JB's playing. Otherwise, throw him in.
You don't need too much value because my lineup does not look that much different.
What do you have remaining salary?
I have 100 remaining salary on my lineup, and I don't have anybody under 7,500.
Oh, I thought you were plugging the douchebags in and figuring out what we had left for our last guy.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm just saying the lineup that I put together via our talk has most of those douchebags in it. I mean, obviously we've talked about more than 6, but we've talked about all 6 of them that are in my lineup. Let's put it that way. I think with the exception of one, I think I put one nice guy to kind of balance it out and kind of reward karma side of things. You
gotta go full douchebag, man. You can't. There are no half measures. You gotta go full douchebag.
The trap team didn't do very well. You can't go full traps. You gotta have a leg day. That was the mistake that we made. Can't go full D-back. Have a nice guy.
If you're gonna go full trap though, like full guys that might be able to use their fitness to their advantage, maybe at altitude, 7,000 feet in the air above sea level, that might be the week because guys get a little more tired. Can you imagine walking 36 holes at this altitude like the guys had to do last week?
Dude, I couldn't imagine walking 36 holes at any altitude.
I do it several times a year. It's not that bad.
I'm not in very good shape.
So we talked about some high-end guys, right? Let's work our way down a little bit, talk about some of the plays we like and why. Mark, if you want to throw in some ownership thoughts and what you're seeing as we go,
Sure.
that would be lovely. So you're seeing Xander as the highest owned guy in the field, huh?
So I just brought up the Roto Grinders just posted the Wednesday PM stats, and it's crazy. Tommy Fleetwood at 26% is the number one.
I like Fleetwood. He's played well here. He finished second to DJ a couple of years back and 14th last year, but his stats recently just haven't been trending. He put like a $12 old Odyssey 2-ball putter from like 10 years ago in his bag last week, and I don't know. To me, that just screams a cry for help.
I'm taking a stand. I am not ever playing Tommy Fleetwood in the 2019 season.
Well, I can't go that far. The guy's kind of stud when it comes to ball striking, but you do you. I'm not going to hate on that. A guy that I like as a pivot, if Fleetwood's going to be that high owned at 8,200, I like Webb Simpson just above him. If you're looking for a guy who's going to be able to stick some approaches and possibly make a lot of birdies.
Yeah, a modest 16% owned.
That's not bad. I mean, compared to where Fleetwood is, I'll take that ownership leverage in GPPs for sure. So my pivot from Xander, though, is Hideki Matsuyama. I'm not sure what you're seeing on ownership from him, but he's a guy that, I mean, if you're looking for a guy who's good with his approaches, that guy absolutely fits the bill. He's had a pretty solid run here after being injured last year. He's looked really good his last few events. Had a nice week. I think a Sunday 67 in tough conditions to jump up into a tie for 7th last week. So he's a guy that I like a lot. And kind of the enigma this week, the guy that's going to be hard to peg is Jordan Spieth.
Oh God!
I've heard him
his
talk
meltdown
about,
last week.
That was tough to watch on Sunday, man.
A plus 10 over 3 holes. Oh God!
I watched him 3-putt from like 4 feet, and I started twitching. Like I just couldn't watch it. It was like watching somebody with the shanks. Yeah, I don't know if I can go to, like, the course actually lines up really well for Jordan because he's not a long hitter. That's why I didn't like him at Riviera to begin with, like we talked about last week. But there's something wrong in his mind, man. He is just all over the map. I can't get on board with Spieth until I see something from him. He's usually a guy where I would want to target him, and kind of be ahead of the curve when guys are waiting to jump on, kind of the wait and see approach. And then, he's a world-class player when he's on, so you target him and you benefit from it when he's there. And even in a world-class field like this at 8,800, that's a pretty good value. But I like Leishman so much more, just $100 less at 8,700. And then Finau $100 above him, and Matsuyama $200. I can't see myself playing any Spieth. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I'm looking for Leishman because I've heard him talked up a lot. I'm not.
His ball striking numbers are always good, and they're particularly good right now.
12.5% for Leishman.
I'll take Leash at 12.5 all day.
So
that's I'll be jumping on.
You want to know who's number 2 in the projected ownership right now?
Can I take a guess?
Yes.
Emiliano Grillo?
Yeah, you nailed it. Yep.
Damn.
Him and Hideki are tied for 2.
Nice. They love their fuck. Hideki's tied for 2nd on ownership.
Yeah, 23%.
There goes my pivot from Xander. If Hideki's number 2 in ownership, I might pivot to Tony Finau because there's a pretty heavy weight towards par 5 scoring too. Might play Hideki in cash and then go to Finau and tourneys because that could provide you with some nice leverage. And he's a guy that even if he finishes outside the top 10, the amount of birdies and eagles that guy makes, man, he could easily still finish inside the top 5 on DraftKings scoring.
Yeah, and I like that thought pattern a lot.
Yeah, but Grillo's a guy that I like his game long term because I always love ball strikers, guys that their long term tee to green game looks good because that's what you can really rely on. Like putting is very much up and down week to week, but I don't know if he's going to be that high owned, second in the field. There's a couple guys. Chris, you might actually have your Kevin Na week. I don't hate Kevin Na this week.
I actually have him. I actually already plugged him into a lineup.
Yeah, he's one of those plotters that he keeps putting it in play. The Bombers don't have that much of an advantage because he's able to put his driver in three where those guys are hitting their long irons just to get in position. And then it's a game of approaches with short to mid irons, and that sounds like Kevin Na to me. I don't know. How you feeling about Kevin Na this week, Chris?
I mean, he's too good of a guy to put in my lineup. He can't be around these other schmucks. So,
are you going with the all douchebag week? Like, you can put multiple lineups in. That'd be okay.
Yeah, I could. Probably not going to do that in golf, though. I've got one lineup. I'm going to roll with it. I've got two guys in there that are, questionable in terms of their attitude. The other four guys are kind of out of the six. Let's put it this way. There's three of them that we don't like. There's one guy that's questionable, and then there's two guys I didn't ask your opinion on, and we're just going to leave it that way. And so it'll pop off. You'll see it tomorrow morning, and then, you'll just look above your lineup. It'll be right there at the top.
Okay. I mean, that sounds good. I'm coming off an abysmal week, so I can't talk too much trash to you at this point. Feeling good about this week coming, though. At least in our group league, I'm coming off a bad week, but had some pretty good GPP lineups last week in PGA.
Oh my God!
But
I was so pissed on Sunday because I'm in first place coming into Sunday, and I ended up 7th or 8th.
Dude, that's typically my MO. Like at this event, the first time it was in Mexico, I know I had Phil and JT, and I had a pretty solid squad going. JT made a hole-in-one at this event 2 years ago. The first year it had been played. So I just loaded up on birdie makers. Nobody knew shit about the course. So I just said, I'm going to go with guys who were low-owned who make a ton of birdies. And those guys had me I was probably winning 10K going into Sunday. And I think I ended up ending up profiting $100. I was so tilted on Sunday. But my teams are like the king of rounds 1 through 3 scoring, and then just crapping the bed on Sunday. It's brutal. But this week I've been honing in a lot more on round 4 scoring. So I'm hoping some of these guys come through for me on Sunday.
Yeah,
I can feel your pain there, buddy.
I was getting all excited last week because I started off really bad with all the rain and everything, and then all of a sudden my team exploded. Only one player missed the cut. I'm like, okay, and I'm in first place in our league. I'm like, all right, I'm set up. Even if they fade just a little bit, I'll still make money. No, my team overall went +6. It's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it was tough scoring conditions. There were some of those guys that really blew up on Sunday. Bubba Watson, man, if you rostered him and you watched him 4-putt the 18th green, that was probably worse than watching Spieth on those short ones. I don't know. Those guys are both head cases right now on the greens.
A little bit of news that came across. This doesn't make a difference to me, but I figure I'd report it. Andrew Putnam is withdrawn from the tournament, so don't play him.
My God, back to the drawing board. Got to start all over. Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. That wasn't my guy.
Other news, I am also not playing in this event this week. So moving on down, I actually like Gary Woodland quite a bit. He tends to play well on courses where you club down off the tee, less than driver courses I'd categorize them as.
You're going to hate me. He's third highest owned.
All right, forget him. Let's pivot down to RCB, Rafa Cabrera-Bello. He played really well here last year. A lot of it was on the back of a strong putting week, but I still think he could back up that third place finish from last year with the top 10 pretty easily. Man, I hate how much Sergio is trending in the right direction for a big week this week, but even despite his relatively high ownership, I may have to play Sergio.
He's a tough one to get rid of.
It's hitting the 8:30 mark. Still got to get to baseball. So let's wrap this up. Who are your picks to win? Who are your tipsy picks? Where are we going with all this?
Let's do a couple of value picks, and then we'll transition into the always popular tipsy picks.
Let's do it.
Couple of guys I like mid to low range. Love Louis Oosthuizen coming off with horrible first round last week. Bounced back in the second round and just missed the cut. I love jumping on him at low ownership. He's been playing fantastically the last couple months leading into last week at 7,500. Ty Hatton finished 10th and 3rd here the last 2 years. Hasn't been playing great, but could easily pop this week. Also made a hilarious joke 2 years ago going to the final round about having only a white pair of pants left in Mexico. You know what can happen with the water and the resulting Hershey squirts. So he became one of my favorite Twitter follows at that moment. I know Juice Luton's getting a lot of talk at 7,300. I think I'm going to stay away. He's just not as much of a birdie maker as I like to roster. And then a couple guys down below. Actually, as a pivot from Grillo, I don't mind Na, but I really, really like Russell Knox this week. He's a very, very good approach player. He's been having a pretty solid season so far at 6,800. Really like him there. And that is where we'll finish it for the lower end.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard anybody mention Knox on anything.
Perfect. My only fear with him is he's a Scotsman and he likes cold weather. It's going to be hot, so I'm not sure his skin tone is what we want for this week, but I'm trusting he'll lather up in his suntan lotion and be fully clothed, and he'll be okay.
Yeah, so I'm looking kind of my mid-range guys for me. And when I say mid-range, like low 8s and 7s, I'm looking at, what do you think of Henrik Stenson or Keegan Bradley this week?
Those are both guys that can make you puke if you watch their tee to green game and then follow their putting closely. But Stenson's been playing. I think Stenson has missed like the last 3 cuts on the European Tour. The first year for this event, he was very highly talked about as a perfect course fit before we had played it. And I think he withdrew with the shits actually that year and didn't play last year. I don't know. I'm kind of lukewarm on Stenson. I think at his value, I wouldn't be surprised if he popped, but I can't jump on it. Who was the other one you asked about?
Keegan Bradley.
Yeah. Keep him on Team Douchebag. He's not for me this week.
All right. So the other kind of right around 7,000, I love Kevin Nod at 6,900. Let's see here. Who else did I put in here? I like Leishman. He's up at 8,700. Byung Hoon An. Do you know him?
Just call him Benny. Just call him Benny on.
Benny on?
What, 7,600? Something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really solid player. I think he's going to have a great year on tour. He played here once 2 years ago, finished 48th. I don't have a ton of thoughts on it this week. His game should fit this course fairly well, so I'm not against it. But I don't know. I like a couple guys around him with Louis being just below him and then Kuchar and Howell just above him. And RCB as well. I like those guys a little bit better.
What do you think of Reavie this week?
The Ches Reavie?
Yeah.
He might be going overlooked this week. His approach game's been off the charts for the most part. He played here last year, didn't finish great, but is his ownership looking pretty low?
Let me see if I can even find him on here.
Yeah, I mean, if he's low owned, just keep an eye on that. If he's low owned, I think he's a great pivot play this week. He's a guy who could pretty easily pop here.
Oh, there's Luton at 8%.
He's at 8, huh?
Patrick Reed at 4.8.
Let's go.
Holy shit. Jordan Spieth at 3.7.
All right, I'm loading up on Spieth. Let's do it.
Right?
Trust the putt.
Chesticles is at 2.8.
The Chesticle. All right. Yeah, I'll load up on some Chesticle at 2.8.
Kevin Na is right below him at 2.2.
Damn, a couple guys you can get on board with and put in like 10% of your lineups and gain a ton of leverage.
Yeah, I really like Kevin Na this week. He really fit my models really well.
Yeah, people don't like to play him. I generally don't either, but when things line up for him, I'm all on board if he's going to be that low owned. I know Chris is too, so let's transition.
All right, let's do a second lineup. I'm going to put Kevin Na.
All douchebag when Kevin Na's stats are lining up.
Look, Kevin Na's my tipsy pick. I'm going to go with Bryson to win it. And I think he's going to only win it in a playoff with Kevin Na. Where are you guys going with this?
Oh, Adam, what's your super low picks and your tipsy pick?
We can go super low. We can go tipsy. As far as super low, are you saying below 7K?
Below 7K.
low 7K. So as a pivot from Mr. Griot, $100 more expensive, I will go with my fellow Scotsman in Russell Knox. I think he's going to be very, very low owned as well. So jump on him, and then DJ is my pick to win.
I like DJ a lot this week too.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with Rory the win.
Okay. Can't hate it. You guys want to do 3 picks to exceed value?
Sure.
Like one for each of us, like we normally do?
Yeah, we can do that.
Chris, you want to start it off?
3 picks to exceed value. I'm going to go with Patrick Reed. I'm going to go with Kevin Na, and I'm going to go with, despite all your warnings, I'm going to go with Ian Poulter. Hey, because you've hated on at least one guy per week that did really well, so I'm just banking that it's going to be him.
I mean, it's likely to happen. I hate on a lot of people, so.
Yeah, sure.
I will go with DJ up top. In the mid-range, I'm actually going to go with the guy we haven't even mentioned yet in Patrick Cantlay. I think his approach game lines up very well. He can get very, very hot with the putter. And on the slightly lower end, I will go with Ty Hatton at 7,300 to rip it up and finish top 10 again this week.
All right, so towards the high end, I am going to go Paul Casey.
Ooh.
8,600. I think he'll make that value. He'll exceed that value. Let's see who else here. I like Cameron Smith at 7,400. And then I'm going to throw one out here that we haven't mentioned yet. 6,700. The Barn Rat.
Ah, love the Barn Rat. He's awesome. He's fat. He smokes like a chimney on the golf course. He swings like a maniac and makes a ton of birdies.
Yes.
Sounds like our kind of
He's gonna make the top 20. I'm telling you right now.
He finished 5th last year, man. He can string some birds together too. Hopefully I can keep my tipsy pick streak going. I had Rogers last week finishing outside the top 100 like 3 events in a row and somehow finishing top 15 out in Cali.
All right,
let's go, Russell.
Let's go tipsies. So Adam, what was your tipsy?
My tipsy, I picked him as my my under 7K to exceed value. I'm gonna stick with Russell Knox.
Sounds
you know
good.
what? That's not tipsy enough. Let's go real tipsy. We're gonna go with a Euro Tour guy who has been trending in the right direction with his game, former Masters champ actually, at 6,600 in Danny Willett. Danny will be my tipsy pick. Danny Willett.
All right.
It probably won't, but we'll try it anyway.
Chris, tipsy pick. Or did you even do your top 3?
You did.
Yeah, it's Kevin Na.
That's
all
right.
The time.
Yeah, Kevin Na.
All the Kevin Na.
Is that going to be your tipsy pick too, is Kevin Na?
Yeah, I'll just tell you guys, I put Barnrat, Na, and Knox in a lineup. So that was my second line. So you can imagine I've got just studs and scrubs.
All right, let me slam a little hop slam here.
I like how you combine studs and duds and stars and scrubs too. Studs and scrubs. I like that a lot, actually.
All right, here's my tipsy pick. It's 6,100.
Oh my God.
Shugo Imahira.
Nice. Any reason, or just because he has a funny name?
No, actually, I researched the guy. He loves skinny fairways and Poa greens.
Wow. All right.
So he's coming over from the Japanese tour to play this event. He fits the course perfectly in my mind. I'm going to go for it, 6,100.
Yeah, I like skinny fairways and grass on the greens, so.
There you go.
So.
All right, you're listening to Draught For Upside, and it's getting real right now. So, who we got here? Cam in the chat room says Sharma 8,100.
On what site? He must be talking FanDuel. Yeah, he's talking FanDuel. So Sharma had a great finish last year. He was actually leading, I think, going into Sunday, and then really faltered. But his form has not been very good coming into the week. I would rather take a shot on, you mentioned the Barn Rat, Kiradech Effie Barn Rat, just below him at 67, or Brandon Grace just above him at 6,800.
All right. Okay, so we're on the Legend Sports Network, and join us tomorrow morning at 11:30 a.m. for First Sip, where we go through our DFS picks for the day. Okay, guys, where do we want to move into next? We have about 15 minutes left in the show. You guys want to talk a little baseball?
Yeah, we can talk a little baseball. I got a couple things here that I wanted to talk about. We've done some beginner topics that were, for anybody that was just starting off, and I wanted to talk to the two of you about a couple things that are a little bit different in baseball than they are in other sports. Primarily, one of them is going to be park factors, and it's kind of telling that we were talking about the elevation at this PGA Tour event and how it's going to play shorter, and how the ball travels a little further. And this is going to be the case in some of these MLB parks too. The uniqueness about each park and the factors that it can have is really weird, because think about this. Like, if you went to a basketball game, every one of the courts is going to be the same. It's a uniform court. It's not one that's a little bit wider in a certain area. The three-point line's a little bit different. But in baseball, every park is very, very unique, and some of those things are going to play towards the hitter's advantage, and some of them are going to play towards the pitcher's advantage. And I think drafting some of those guys, not just in your season-long leagues that you want to pay attention to, but more primarily, you need to be really sensitive to it when it comes to your daily leagues. So we talk a lot about DFS. That's certainly something that we're going to be looking at a lot in First Sip and moving forward, and when guys are in good situations at good parks. I know baseball is not your thing, Mark, but do you know the best park for hitters?
Colorado, right?
Coors Field.
That's right.
Coors Field.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's historically always been one of the best ones for hitters. Numbers are inflated, the thin air. Here's the other thing is that Chase Field for a long time in Arizona was similar. In fact, it was actually better for DFS to play hitters in Chase Field. They didn't have the same type of salary bump and the adjustment that happens in Coors Field. But recently, they introduced putting their balls into a humidor as of last year. So I don't really have I'm pretty sure the scoring was down last year, but everything that I could pull up only ran through 2014. So there's a lot of interesting data that you can look at here in terms of when you're targeting these other players. Do you know other fields or other places that might be interesting outside of Coors Field, which is the obvious because of elevation?
Nope, I'm not that much into it.
Isn't
Yankee Stadium pretty high scoring too?
Which one?
The Yankee Stadium, the short porch in right field.
Yeah, so it's going to be great for left-handed hitters hitting home runs, but the difference is that it's going to be bad for everybody else hitting doubles or triples. And so a lot of these parks that give up a lot of home runs as a byproduct of them being a short porch or not having the same type of distance is not going to give you the same type of doubles or triples or singles because of that. Now, conversely, places like Petco in San Diego, which is kind of interesting because it's where Manny just went and signed, they don't hit as many home runs. It's a .93, one being average for home runs into left field, but triples as a result are going to be 1.19. So you're going to hit more triples because it's a longer distance to the fence. So when we're targeting players in Colorado, Baltimore is another one, Philadelphia, Cincinnati, Milwaukee, and the Braves, a lot of teams tend to build their teams around what their park is going to do, and some teams build their park around what their players are going to do. I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember when Juan Gonzalez played for the Tigers?
Absolutely.
Now, do you remember that they moved in some of the fences for Juan Gonzalez because he complained about it?
Yeah, I think at first it was one of the biggest parks that had ever been built, right, as far as the dimensions?
Yeah, and they tried to bring it in because Juan wasn't happy about it. Juan really never got off to any type of good start here in Detroit. So, but they tried to kind of cater the park to him. And it's interesting the way that some of these teams put people together and put their teams together. Like, for example, in Atlanta, really, really strong for left-handed hitters. And I think that they have that shorter porch in left field because of Freddie Freeman being a power-hitting left-handed hitter and building the team around him and knowing that he was going to be part of their future. And so that's probably why they put that together. So that's something that's you got to pay attention to, not only when you're drafting your players, but when you're drafting them on a daily basis. What do you think something else that has an effect that you have to pay attention to, more so probably in baseball than anything else? And I would say golf is probably the second one that has an effect. Well, golf doesn't have a starting pitcher, but the weather.
That's true. I missed that last part. Oh, there you go.
So what happens with the weather? Basically, when it's hotter out, you're going to see the ball fly a little bit more. When it's colder, the ball doesn't quite get out there. So what we have at the beginning of the year is we have some of these lower scoring games because the ball doesn't quite get out, especially because it's been really cold in the opening day, the end of March, beginning of April, and into the next 2 weeks. But fields like Arlington and Texas, the players that you can target there because they're going to hit a lot of home runs because it's going to be hot for the majority of the time in Arlington, Texas. And so in that middle of June, middle of July, that ball is really going to fly out there. So that's another thing that you're paying attention to. The other part of it is the wind factor. And some of these fields are built to mitigate the wind, San Francisco being one of them. That's a very windy area, but the park mitigates the wind effect. One of the parks that does very poorly at mitigating the wind effect would be the Cubs. So once you get to June, and I tell you not to pay too much attention to it in April or May, once you get to June, you basically can almost bet the game. If the wind is blowing out, you avoid the starting pitchers, you take the over and you take the hitters. Wind's blowing in, you take the pitchers and avoid the hitters. So these are some of the extracurricular factors that you play into when you're looking at baseball versus looking at some other sports. And certainly it has a factor in football, but not to the same effect that I think that it does in baseball. And I think it has a factor in golf, but again, not to the same effect that it does in baseball. Certainly, as I've stated, it's going to have a bigger effect on a day-by-day basis. But, when you're drafting certain players for your season-long teams, it is a good strategy to try and load up on as many guys that are going to play in Colorado, specifically Rockies, but guys that are in the division, because they're going to have that opportunity to play at Coors Field more often than, guys that never go there. Make sense?
If you're coming down to a few guys that you like at a certain pick in a season long, are you weighing guys that are playing in a certain division, like you said, with maybe like San Diego and San Francisco playing at Colorado quite a bit throughout the year? Are you weighing that a little bit, like maybe as a tiebreaker?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen a lot of talk about Manny Machado being bumped down in his ADP significantly because he signed with San Diego. I don't think it's as bad as a signing as if like Bryce Harper went there because the home run is 0.81 versus 0.93. But yeah, it certainly plays an effect. It plays an effect in other people's minds, and you should really pay attention to that, not just from a park factor, but obvious other factors in terms of the teams that they're going to be playing more frequently, the pitching staffs on those teams, are they playing in a strong division? And then also where they're going to be hitting in the lineup is also very, very important. We've talked about before at times that guys that are hitting in the top half of the lineup tend to get more at bats just because they, when it goes around, obviously the first and second hitters are going to be the first guys to come back up in the lineup, and you might not go through that line an entire 4 or 5 times. Maybe it just goes through 4.5. But I pull up some statistics here, which is kind of weird, and this is more of a DFS thing, but the frequency of each spot in terms of GPP winning lineups, the number one hitter is there 9 out of 10 times. So you basically want to have a number one hitter in your lineup almost at all times, and I think it's pretty obvious as to why. They're the first guy that gets up. They have the peripherals with the runs. Some of them have the home runs, but then it goes kind of like this. The number 1's 9, the 2 is 7, the 3 is 2, 4 is 5, 5 is 4, 6 is 5, 7 is 1. Very rarely do you ever find a number 8 or number 9 hitter in a large field GPP winning lineup. So that's another thing to kind of take a look at when you're putting together those lineups on a very, very basic level. If you're putting together a cash lineup, I really don't think you should have anybody under 5. But even in a GPP, unless it's a real strange situation, 8 and 9 hitters are not guys that are going to have tremendous value on a daily basis. But if a guy is slated as being an 8 or 9 hitter on a season-long team, he's probably not going to have a lot of value for you in that format as well.
Interesting.
So let's see here. So let's see. The other thing that I wanted to point out when we're looking at pitchers as they go through the spring training, one of the things that you want to pay attention to is velocity changes. Pitchers tend to do worse if they're especially if they're going to be a high strikeout, high velocity guy. If they lose even 1 mile an hour on that pitch, and this is something that you can find at Fangraphs, as we said, that's a guy that you're going to look at as kind of that's a problem. Losing 1 mile an hour, 2 miles an hour. Is this a guy that is just doing that because it's spring training? Is this a guy that we want to stay away from and move down our draft boards? Is this a guy that in his first couple starts on the year that we're going to want to target hitters in a DFS situation? I would say all of those are the case. So we really want to pay attention to what happens in spring training, similar to what happens in NFL preseason, where you're looking at kind of snap counts as an indication of where guys are going to play. Like, is this guy playing all of his snaps with the first string? Well, then you know what? This guy's probably going to be the first string wide receiver, especially when it's not a receiver that's well known. I mean, we're not talking like a Julian Edelman or, a Marvin Jones, but like a Kenny Galladay. If he's getting all of his snaps when Matt Stafford's out there, it's pretty safe to say that this guy is going to be entrenched as one of the number 1, 2, or 3 receivers with the Lions. And that was pretty much the case. Now, if a guy is going out there and all of his starts for his team in spring training, he's throwing 2 to 3 miles an hour less than what he was the year before, but he's throwing the same type of pitches. This is a guy that, there might be something wrong. He could be hurt, but he's definitely a guy we want to target. I'm going to point at a specific situation that happened last year. It was going to be with Danny Duffy. Had a significant drop in velocity in the preseason. And do you know what happened on opening day? He gave up like 4 home runs to the Chicago White Sox in the first couple innings. So as a popular cash target, Danny Duffy turned out to be the guy that you wanted to stack against if you were going to make a ton of money. So that's one thing that you really, really, really want to pay attention to initially, and then also throughout the year, is the velocity change in pitchers, the park, and the weather that's going on. So those are some kind of just beginner tips to look at when you're putting together your lineups, not just for your season long, but for your daily as well.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Adam, how's it going over there?
Good, man. No, that was good stuff. I'm just listening, trying to increase my knowledge here coming into the baseball season.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like we're all just sitting here drinking 9% ABV beers and talking some sports, and I think that you guys, as enthusiastic as you are about golf, I don't think that there's that big of a difference from golf to baseball in terms of the mindset, the strategy, the volatility that goes into building these lineups. So I think if you can be successful in building the golf lineup, you certainly can do the same with a baseball lineup as well.
So
yeah, I think a lot of that.
Yeah. So Patrick Kane finally got on the board tonight.
God, is it 4-1 now?
That is exciting.
Oh, the Red Wings are getting blown out, which is very disappointing to a certain point. But
Gross.
I'm glad I didn't play Jimmy Howard tonight.
Yeah, we talked about him this morning too.
Yeah, he was on my list.
Who'd you end up going with in that?
I have Halak in all my lineups.
Yeah, me too. So I guess we're not going to gain leverage on each other that way. We'll live or die with Halak.
No. All right. We are out of time, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us, Adam and Chris. You've been listening to Draught For Upside. Join us tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. on the Legend Sports Network for First Sip by Draught For Upside, where we'll break down the DFS lineups. Tomorrow will be NHL and the return of the NBA. Other than that, for Chris and Adam, I am Brewery Mark, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks, fellas.